Welcome to our webinar. We will be just under an hour, taking you through this new guide to effective implementation. And we're really excited to share the report with you. You may well have had a good extensive look through. We'll just tune into the key bits, the key changes, so that you can really begin to think, what are the things that we need to just adjust and maybe think about a little bit more, or what are the things that just confirm what you already knew, and you can do a little bit more of. Thank you, Haida. If you're not signed up to the St Matthew's Research School newsletter, please do click onto the QR code. We would love to have you as part of our list of schools and people that receive our newsletter, which is always packed with interesting articles and blogs and information about the EEF. I'll give you just a minute just to scan that QR code in if you haven't already done it. Thank you, Haida. We'll just introduce ourselves. I'm Sonia Thompson. I'm the head teacher and director of St Matthew's Research and Support School. A little bit about me. My current exciting thing is a commissioner as part of the Oracy Education Commission, chaired by Jeff Barton. So I'm really excited about being part of that and going on a journey. I've only had one meeting, so I can't give you any insider information yet. But I'm looking forward to the next series of meetings and hopefully some really good outcomes from that. Two books I'm recommending: Reading Teachers, if you're interested, whether you're primary or secondary, in moving reading forward in your setting. Reading for Pleasure Forward. This is a great book. Teachers, librarians, lecturers, head teachers, just talking about some key principles around reading for pleasure. And then, of course, we have to recommend St Matthew's book, An Ethic of Excellence. I'll be shocked if you haven't got it already. Why not? I'm joking. Please do tune into it. It's a nice, simple, easy, quick read. Thank you, Haida.
Hi, I'm Haida. I'm the Deputy Head Teacher here at St Matthew's, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Research School. I lead on curriculum with these subjects. I don't know what's happening with my mouse. It's got a mind of its own today. Sorry. Can you see the correct slide? Yes. Okay. I am on the Charter College Advisory Board in terms of rethinking curriculum for Oracy, and the Charter College have great free webinars that you can tune into if you are looking at developing your Oracy practice within your setting. And I am also an Opening Worlds project lead. We are a hub school for Christine Council and Steve Mastin's History, Geography and RE curriculum. So we lead a range of schools across the West Midlands. So the implementation guidance report is really helpful for us in making sure that we lead our schools with as much fidelity to the existing programme as possible. The book I'm recommending today is Talking Points, Discussion Activities in the Primary Classroom. The title doesn't sell it enough for me. It is a great book if you're looking at developing your dialogic practice in the specific subject domains. It's a great book to help you fine-tune your dialogic questions that allow for a genuine discussion to happen in science, in PE, in RE. So that's the book I'm recommending.
Okay, we're starting with our CEO, Professor Becky Francis. I'll just give you a minute to have a read. And I love the line that says, ultimately, it's not just about what you implement, but it's about how you do it. And a really big element of the change, is just thinking about that process a little bit more in terms of what does good implementation and what does that journey look like. And also thinking about the flexibility that that type of journey, any implementation journey, must have embedded within it. Really, really important. Thank you, Haida. This is the new diagram that really pulls together some of the key elements, those behaviours that drive really effective implementation, those contextual factors. And we know that context matters no matter what you're doing. And really, recommendation 2 really focuses in on context. And then recommendation 3 really focuses in on that structured but flexible process in order to enact implementation. And the diagram, hopefully to you, really illustrates that all of those things have to work together. It's really important because we know that behaviour and context, they underpin effective implementation. And really, they should be the things that as schools we're working within, we're working towards day in, day out. And then that process really just helps schools to navigate the change and to organise that kind of manageable phases that you want any good implementation process to have. So you'll recognise that kind of explore, prepare, deliver, sustain. You'll recognise that, but even within that, there are some key changes. Thanks, Haida. Just to hold up the two against each other then, we can see the kind of direct changes. I'll give you a few minutes just to orientate yourself between the two. So lots of similarities, but also some key differences as well. And that's what we'll take you through over the next just under an hour. Thank you. I think this is the big message coming out of the new guidance reports. We talked a lot about treating implementation as a process and not an event. And it's not that we're moving away from that message, but what this new report gives us is a really strong framework for how to do it well. How can we ensure that the process is going to be effective? And I think for me, the big difference and the big difference that the report really emphasises and iterates is people. People matter in any good implementation process. And fundamentally, implementation is about people. And it's about how do we ensure that people understand what we're trying to do, what changes we're trying to make, and how we're trying to have impact on our pupils through those changes. So how do we influence those behaviours, those interactions, in order to drive really strong improvement? And in the guidance report, it talks about making and acting on evidence-informed decisions. Really, really important. Thank you. We know that there are always barriers. There's always going to be stumbling blocks to any implementation, any new approach, any ideas that you've got, because we know that schools are absolutely complex. I was supposed to meet with a dad today, and I started a conversation with him on the phone at about 9:30. I've yet to phone him back, just because the complexity of a school day, it's really hard sometimes to keep a thread when you've got 7 other threads that you're trying to hold on to. So we know the complexity of the environments that we're in, those competing pressures, those resources that we need to grab a hold of, clearing our headspace throughout the day. And what this guidance report really focuses in on is how do we ensure that we're doing fewer things better? That's the key message, fewer things better. And we've got to be really careful in our selection in terms of embedding those evidence-informed approaches, because what we want to do is drive that meaningful and that sustainable change. What we want to think about is how can we move a little bit closer to what we're trying to do, and what we're ultimately trying to do is make a difference to all children, regardless of their background, regardless of their circumstances. We want all children to have access to high quality education, and high quality evidence-informed education. So effective implementation has to play that crucial role. And of course, it's going to require collective effort in order to break that link. And often, depending where your school is, that link can have a stranglehold on schools sometimes. So how do we ensure that we're working together to effectively break that hold? So really, as I said, the emphasis, thank you, Heidi, is on the quality of implementation. I'll let you have a quick read. And it is about how do we establish those habits and behaviours, because we know that, as I said, implementation isn't straightforward. On the one hand, we've got to develop those infrastructures that we need, resources, time. And then on the other hand, it's fundamentally a social process. And it's about how do we ensure that those interactions between people in order to help and enable implementation to happen well. So again, it's just putting implementation at the heart of it. So how do we do that process well? Particularly as it is a social process. Thank you, Haida. So we're going to move into recommendation 1. I'm going to let you have a quick read. I don't know if it's worth dropping the link to the guidance report into the chat. And you can see on recommendation 1 that I've already talked about these 3 elements working together: engage, unite, and reflect. And these are the behaviours that we're looking for in order for the people that we're working with to move and drive good implementation forward. And hopefully this engaging, uniting, reflecting will cut across any individual needs, any contextual factors that we've got. And what they'll do is kind of bring together and shape the direction of travel. There'll be some clarity around what is going to be implemented, and hopefully some really strong agreement, because there is that clarity. And then leaving that space to monitor, to be flexible, to improve, to adapt. It's not a rigid model. It's not a journey that we're just going to keep going forward on it, regardless of what's happening on the periphery. We're really taking into account all the other competing factors, because ultimately we need it to work. Thank you, Haida. I'm going to take you through each of those areas. And there may be some small text, don't worry about that at the moment. I just dropped the link in, so you might want to open it yourself, your document, if you haven't already done that. And I've already said that engage really is about those 3 tenets, those 3 recommendations in order to engage people and shape the direction of travel. You want to unite people, you also in that engagement process want to think about already how you're going to bring people together. And that has got to be around the clarity of the message. Why are you making this change? Why are we on this journey? Do people understand the reasons for change? And it is about ensuring that in this engaged process, part of the process, you are sharing the knowledge and the expertise, you're bouncing ideas off each other. Really, really important. And of course, what you want is clear communication. You want people to be able to talk about what you're trying to do. Feel free to talk about it. Fear or favor, whether it's good or bad. You need those dissenting voices as well to keep you in check. Sometimes we try and shut down people who are not on board. Actually, the job is, how do we get them on board? And we know we're going to move forward. Sometimes we know we're going to move forward, but even in that moving forward, those dissenting voices will always be a checkpoint for us. They'll be the ones keep nagging us, keep saying, we're not quite sure about this, but we need that. We need it. Keeps us focused. Ensures that we're even more, we're thinking even more about that clarity, about that communication. So this is fundamental around people. I'm just going to give you just a chance just to pause and reflect on implementation where people have not necessarily been at the forefront of the thinking. Because of course, we always talk about the children, we always talk about the why, but we don't necessarily talk about how we're going to grab and engage staff straight off the bat. And then linked closely to that, thank you, Heide, is unite. I'm going to give you just a few minutes just to read through. And this is about your values, your culture. What are the important messages in your school? Because any changes you make have got to link directly to what your school believes in. If you say your school, I mean, our school, we always talk about courage, attainment, pride. We talk about with God, nothing is impossible. So when we're implementing, we've got to unite people around the fact that we're on a mission. We're on a mission to change children's lives. We're making this change. We're going on this implementation journey because it's about our culture. It's about our mission. And often we don't take those think the things that we're trying to change back to your core mission. Because any changes you make, you're not just doing it for the sake of it. Hopefully you're not. You're doing it because it's part of your mission. Part of your mission to improve children's lives, to improve outcomes for all children, regardless of background, regardless of status, regardless of where they're being educated. So we've got to take everybody back to that when we're in that implementation phase. We've got to unify around the knowledge and understanding. Is everybody clear about the evidence? Is everybody clear about why you're doing what you're doing? That clarity is crucial. You've got to iterate it all the time. And you may think in your head, I've done this, I've said this, gosh, she really needs me to go over again. Does he really need me to say this again? Yes, he does. Yes, she does. She needs you to say it again and again and again. What are those processes in terms of the techniques, the professional development? And again, professional development is right in the heart of this implementation process. It probably was hinted at, mentioned in the old document. It is in it this time. It is about those mechanisms because we know most implementation does at some point go back to what do we need to do in order for staff to make those changes. So it is about how do we ensure that that professional development is well thought through, because what we're trying to do is strengthen our teachers' competencies across those areas. So we're trying to organically grow this implementation process through the things that we're already doing, but we want to do them even more effectively. And then that final one, that reflection time. Andy, I'm going to click on the comment. Yeah. Often we talk about what, yeah, sometimes I forget to explain the why. Absolutely. Absolutely. Got to get that right at the heart of what we're doing. And we might need to iterate it over and over again until people understand. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to read through. So reflect. Sorry, Haida. What are you currently doing? What are your needs? In order for this to be successful, what are the needs? What are children currently experiencing, and what do you want to improve and get them to experience? And will what you're trying to implement enable children's experiences to get better? There's got to be a clarity in that. If it's not clear, that's when staff start to ask you, we've been doing that. We've been doing it. But what you need is that clarity around, well, this is where they are. This is where we want to take them. That needs to be really clear. Does it work for your school? Often we can go into other people's schools and see some fabulous things, and suddenly we want to do it at our school. But actually, does your context mean that it's right for your school? So that fit and feasibility is really important. Your school's unique. It's unique to you. It's unique to your context. It's unique to your families and your community. So it's really important that you just unpick that a little bit around what is going to work. Have you got the appropriate people? Have you got the appropriate resources? Have you got the finances needed to make this change that you want to make? Does it require finances? Can it be done internally? Do you need somebody from outside? How are you going to pay for that? All of these things need to be thought through. And then that reflection on the process itself. Whether it's being delivered as intended. And we always talk about fidelity. We always talk about fidelity. But of course, within fidelity, there is flexibility because you know it's about context. So are you sticking too rigidly to something and not taking into account the context that you've got? You might not have that level of resources that other school had, but actually you're very good at making things work in your context. How do you ensure that you've got that balance right? And are there any other barriers that you need to think through? If those barriers are removed, is implementation going to get better? Are those barriers, can they be removed? Is it actually going to be too much of a challenge? Do you need a little bit longer? And one of the things we always talk about is time. We always talk about time, and we have to, it's the probably key thing that we talk about is time. But the evidence does tell us if we want things to happen, we've got to make time. What do you need to get rid of in your school in order for things to work? I was just reading, there's a great document I've moved it out the way, the theory of change from evidence-based education. And they talked about the fact that We do a lot of stuff in schools. We do a lot of stuff that the evidence doesn't even back. That's probably unnecessary, but we just do it because we always do it. Well, if it's important, for instance, professional development is said to be one of the biggest game changers for schools, but we don't make enough time for it. We need to do more and more and more. But what do we get rid of if we want better professional development? What do we get rid of? So is it about that fit and feasibility? Is it about what barriers need to be removed? Thank you, Haida. So effective implementation is about adopting those behaviours that drive good implementation. Engage, unite, and reflect. And they may well be familiar terms to you, but how are we going to make sure that we're setting the bar really high? We want good, sustainable change. We've got to set the bar high. They're often difficult to get right. Uniting people around a change can be the hardest thing ever. But how can we ensure we're not watering down what we want just because we've got a few dissenting voices? Remember, the dissenting voices are good. We want those. We want them. How do we work with those people to enable them to move forward? If we don't get those right, we end up with poor implementation. So we're going to give you a time just to reflect. Set a little bit of a question for you. How have you done this sort of thing before? Or has what you've heard made you think, oh, we've been quite good at that bit, but not necessarily thought through enough the other bit? I think for me, the implementation process, it's really obvious that people have to be at the heart of it. It's really obvious, but I probably didn't think about that enough. Didn't think about people enough. So that for me has been really eye-opening. So what's been successful for you before? Just have a quick reflection and just jot down any of your thoughts in the chat as soon as you're ready. Does it feel new? Does it feel like something that as a school, yeah, we're confident? Or is there one area that you think, it's probably where we've got a little bit wrong? And don't be shy, this is no judgment zone. We're not going to note down any school names, so don't worry about that.
Shall I? Oh. Really need to focus on making sure the mission keeps being the guiding focus and over communicate.
Yeah. I agree with that. Often we don't take implementation back to our culture. We're not making changes for the sake of it. And we've got to remind ourselves and remind our staff that if this is what we stand for, we can't stand still.
Deliberately building in time for reflection has been helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. If not, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely requires the time. Yeah. Thank you, Gaurav.
Sonia, shall I pick up on the next recommendation and then
Yeah.
we can come back to any more? Okay.
Yeah. Keep dropping in.
Thank you. Okay, so Sonia has talked through the behaviours that are needed for the effective process of implementation to occur. And these behaviours need to be ongoing throughout the cycle that you see. But again, another new recommendation, an updated recommendation, is around the contextual factors. And this diagram is really great at showing how it underpins the whole process and the behaviours. So our context underpins the behaviours that our staff enact and how the process can be implemented, whether it can be implemented well or not so well. So I'm going to take us through recommendation 2, which is attend to the contextual factors that influence your implementation. So whilst it may seem simple, that of course we would attend to our contextual factors, what this recommendation does is break it down into 3 really clear actions that we can think about before we look at the process of implementation, so that we can identify those pinch points, think about the people who will be involved, and really understand what it is that we need to implement in the first place. So I'm going to break these down into the 3 actions. So the first is what is being implemented. Leaders and staff have to think about what is being implemented before we implement it, so that these things that we hope to change in terms of our pupils' outcomes can be implemented with evidence-informed practice. They are right for our settings. Sonia's already talked about fit and feasibility, but also they're manageable to implement. So we're just going to delve into a little bit about what is being implemented. Now, when we talk about what is being implemented, it might seem really simple in its incision. Well, of course, I know what's going to be implemented. I'm going to implement X, or I'm going to think about this fluency intervention and implement it across my school. However, when we had the update as research schools, when we had the update, John Eaton, who was one of the writers of the implementation process, said it's often the thing that we gloss over the quickest, because we know what we want to implement based on our findings, based on our data. However, we don't give it the time to really unpick and narrow down what it is that we want to implement. And this then forms, if we spend time identifying the problem and identifying what will be the vehicle that will change that problem, if we spend time articulating that, then we are going to have staff whose behaviours are more likely to enable the change. And John Eaton, he talks about not just buy-in from your staff, but being wholeheartedly in. And if you identify what is being implemented clearly enough, then that will be one way in which staff's behaviours will automatically start to shift. So he talks about kind of 3 strands in order to think about what is being implemented. It needs to be evidence-informed. It needs to be right for your setting. So again, context is really important here. Whilst a programme might have really good outcomes for a particular school in a particular scale, in a particular trial, it might not necessarily have the outcomes for your school. And it also needs to be feasible. So what work are we doing to unpick that intervention so that it's feasible, that our staff have the capability, the opportunity, and the motivation to implement it? So it made us think of 3 things that we can recommend in terms of if you want to find out around effective implementation and what programmes might have the best bets for your school. We just wanted to recommend 3 places for you to look. The first is the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. This is consistently updated by the EEF, and I know that many of you will have seen this before, but what this does is it breaks down the intervention by cost, the evidence strength, so you can see the higher the padlocks, the more robust the evidence is, and you can also see the month's impact. So what the Teaching and Learning Toolkit helps us to identify is if we use these interventions with fidelity and stick to those active ingredients that really hold that programme to what it is, they define that programme, then they may have those outcomes for our pupils as well. The second, of course, are the guidance reports, because the guidance reports have been created and written upon hundreds of reviews and evidence from all kinds of sectors. So the implementation guidance report that we are talking about today, the reviews have come from not just education, but business, charity. There's been reviews from lots of places and lots of evidence research gone into it. The guidance reports are really helpful because they give you the recommendations that you can dig deeper into. And alongside these, they do have reading lists if you want to find out more about the particular intervention. So it might be something around literacy, it could be something about learning behaviours, but the guidance reports are a good place to start. And then in the same vein, Sonia's already mentioned the theory of change document that she was reading from evidence-based education, and they also have the Great Teaching Toolkit. So again, another kind of sector that is looking at how to make evidence-informed decisions as a school and move your pupil outcomes forward for whatever it is that you need. And then how have we kind of thought about that ourselves? When we look at our subjects and our implementation plans, we really want to define what it is that we want to move forward. What is it that, as a phonics lead, I want to ensure I do so that I can close those gaps for those children. So, for example, one of the implementation ingredients I needed to ensure interventions for the phonics programme were consistent, taught with fidelity to the script, and moving the children forward. Really identifying what it is that needed to be implemented then helped me understand the logistics of it, the things that come next, which I will talk about in a moment. Systems and structures then are another potential thing that can get overlooked when we are thinking about implementation, because we have this great idea, we have this great intervention, this whole class pedagogy, whatever it is, and we're really excited about it. We've got the people that we need to kind of drive it forward. And then for some reason, it can go successfully or not as successful as we hoped. And one of the reasons for a real success in terms of implementation are the systems and the structures that we as leaders put in place. For example, things that just seem common sense, like time allocation, how are we going to baseline, what's the room that the children are going to do this intervention is, what's the contingency plan if the violin teacher's in that room and they need to move. Whilst these things seem really common sense, it's really important that through our implementation process and planning that we think about our contextual factors and they influence our decisions when we're thinking about effective implementation. So it gives some examples. I'm just going to cast your eyes to the bottom left of the screen. It gives some examples, so school structures such as timetables, logistics and processes, resources, which Sonia's already mentioned, time, huge, but it needs to be thought about. And then what kind of team have we got around this implementation? So these common sense things can often be really important when driving successful implementation because they help the vehicle of it run really smoothly. Within these systems and structures, of course, at the heart of it are people. And that's what we really love about this guidance report, is it just exemplifies the importance of your team and the collaboration that's needed. So within this, when I'm thinking about data and monitoring systems for a particular intervention, I need to reflect, I need to engage, and I need to unite staff. And one way of engaging staff around systems and structures is involving more staff than you necessarily would have in the first place. So John shared an example with us in that he had an idea and normally he would have bounced it off a couple of members within his colleagues and peers within his team, but he sought to develop the team further so that they could have more of a discussion around the thing that needed to be implemented. And just to share some examples with you, what we do is, and I know that every school here will do it, so it's nothing new, but an iterative PD design, which means that we are systematically coming back to specific things that we want to move forward in our school. So our PD calendar is set and it's thought through so that it's an iterative process. And Sonia's already mentioned the effective professional guidance report. It's given time for our staff to practice those key behaviour changes we expect to see through a new intervention or through a new pedagogy or tweaked pedagogy. We also have been implementing a new way of kind of tweaking and thinking about our curriculum. So we've been implementing Alex Bedford's pupil book study, which runs from early years all the way up to secondary. But that meant our system in terms of how we book monitor then also had to change. So we changed our book look performer to suit the structure that we implemented and put in place, so that we're pulling strands together of our school leadership so that everything is a seamless thread, rather than we're doing it like this for this way, this for another thing, and then again differently here. So when you've got a team of people who can understand and know about the things that you're implementing, because you've really broken it down, then you have that more fruitful discussion about, actually, this could influence this part of our curriculum too. How can we change that? So again, just some systems and structures that we've thought about. And then we've already mentioned people who enable change. However, again, what we love about this guidance report is it doesn't talk about, we've all got those amazing staff, those staff that always do, that champion everything, that are just, yes, 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 let me have a go. But it talks about how to develop and make staff feel empowered to act. How to develop those staff that might not necessarily be the ones that you might want to that champion your implementation straight away, but how can we develop it so that they're involved but part of it. And Sonia's already talked about like the discussions that you could have from people that are dissenting or who have a different opinion, but the one thing that unites us all in one building is the vision and values that we hold. So think about your people who enable change. And I know, again, we'll all do this, but if you're ever implementing something new, have you got that working party? I mean, we're a one-form school, so a working party is an interesting thing to try and create. However, I'm sure across trusts and MATs, you've got those working parties for things that you want to implement across your schools. And do those people, are they the ones to feed back and lead PD and be the ones to share how things are going, rather than just the subject leader or just the member of SLT, because giving those staff the platform in order to share how it's gone for them is really important. And again, that's something that I'm sure that you'll all be doing anyway. It means that we're then reliant less on an individual person. We're just distributing out that responsibility, but it doesn't feel like it's an additional responsibility because our staff are already bought in. They're in this with us too. So I know that we've already thought about and reflected on the particular recommendations, but it's just a good practice or a good thing to do with your teams about thinking about a time that wasn't as successful. We thought about a successful time. Can we think about a time that, yeah, it didn't go so well because of X, Y, or Z? So Sonia, I'll hand over to you now.
Start off by unmuting myself. As you're reflecting, I am going to move it into recommendation 3, which links really nicely to what Haida talked about in terms of using a structured, thank you, Haida, using a structured yet flexible approach. Just giving you a couple of minutes to read. And it is really clear that structured process is needed for the behaviours, for the day-to-day, but it is about that ongoing learning and improvement. And often learning and improvement requires some flexibility within the process. Thank you, Haida. I'm going to skip over that one if that's all right. The wheel, as you can see, there are some new elements to the wheel. And the guidance report takes you through each of those areas. Thank you, Haida. And the idea that we've talked about it, it's messy. It's a messy process. That's what we want it to be. We want it to be very linear, very easy. Everybody's on board. Children are making progress. If only. It's messy. It's stop-start. People leave. But how do you ensure that through that mess, there can be some success in terms of what you are thinking through? and the process that you're trying to engage with. So there are some resources that have been updated. Thanks, Haida. The explore phase, there is a new shiny model, very much linked to the old model. And I love the arrows, right for your setting, feasible to implement. So again, just really important, knowing your problem. What's going on already? How challenging is this approach going to be to implement? And I've talked about that before, the level of professional development. Can that be in-house? What are the resources that are available? Thanks, Ida. I'm going to ask you to flick again. Again, I'm just going to ask you to have a quick read through. We could put a spanner in the works with implementation if it's overcomplicated. It's got to be simple. Simple, clear, measurable, all of these things. And if you've thought it through and you know where the potential pinch points are, you'll have already planned the contingency for what you're going to do if that thing happens. So if that person leaves, because I didn't rely on one person at the start, I made sure that I expanded out my team, I had my working party, I know that it's not going to be reliant on one person. So you've got to know your pinch points and you've got to have your contingencies in place. Thanks, Ida. In that prepare element, talks about plan and design and practically prepare. Thank you. And it really is, again, you can see an updated implementation planning document. A couple of things just taken out and a couple of clear areas of emphasis. And again, it's great to see that short-term, medium-term, long-term. What are you looking for long-term? What are you looking for short-term? So that it can be measurable. No point leaving it until the end of the year. Got to be able to go into it and see where you are. It's that flexibility that you need. And I love the fact that when you're defining the problem, you're looking at the perspective of pupil, teachers, and leaders. Again, same as what we did before. What's nice about the document, thank you, Haida, is that there are some really, really nice suggestions around how you can work through this document, completing this document. So some really helpful documents to support that. And really linking it back to the diagram, the illustration at the beginning. Which bits are unite, which bits are reflect, which bits are engage. All of that is set out in the guidance report. And I think this is just so helpful, the table of implementation strategies. So just giving you some key ideas around which bits of that circle would that fit into. So just helping you to think through the process. So all of that is on the website. And it's going to inform your decision making. Again, clear link back, thank you, Haida, to the professional development guidance report. So all of those mechanisms are really front and center in this guidance report, because we know we've got to take time to specify and understand those kind of core components that are going to enable improvement in any type of teaching practice. They're going to shape our implementation strategies. They're going to keep people on track. They're going to allow us to monitor fidelity and make those intelligent adaptations, not just random changes. Thank you. And again, some really useful resources in the report to support that thinking. Love the bit about motivating teachers, developing those teaching techniques, and what will the likely outcomes be based on those areas. Thanks, Ida. So of course you're going to reflect, and please do feel free to drop in any questions. We've got about a minute, and we're going to use every single second because we did start a couple of minutes later. So hopefully you'll stick with us. I'm going to hand over to you, Haida. I'm sure I took some of your bits, by the way. Sorry about that.
Great. Okay. So just do pop those in the chat if you do have any. We just wanted to finish with talking about, deliver and sustain. And the analogy that was used previously by the implementation team at the EEF was about tending to your garden. You want to make sure you nurture the soil, pull out all of the weeds before you then plant. And it's understandable that implementation dips can also occur later. So when you're in the deliver and you're in the sustain phase, you can have a dip in motivation and implementation. And that's what's so wonderful about the new diagram, is that it's less cyclical, in that you can just go back and make those changes as you need to. The analogy is no longer a garden, because someone made the point that often you garden alone, and we've talked about the importance of people. So if you've got ground force behind you, Charlie Dimmock and Alan Titchmarsh, then yes, that is a good analogy for us. But maintaining that effort can be difficult. But we just want to remind ourselves that you build sustainability by thinking about all of the different contextual factors and behaviours that are put in place. Keep acknowledging and supporting those good practices, and that visual at the bottom is a bit more violent than I wanted, but just nudge people and say thank you, nudge people.
Not in the face, not in the face. Don't nudge them in the face.
Don't nudge them in the head. But just continue to support the practices that are happening and review and act. That's what they recommend in terms of maintaining that effort. We just wanted to leave you with a big read, a big blog, and a big listen, as we always do at St Matthews. The big read is the guide to implementation. Thank you, Gaurav, for putting that in the chat. There's a blog written by Jonathan Sharples about what are the key changes. Hopefully, you've seen the key changes through this webinar. And then there's an EEF podcast around evidence-informed leadership. It has been updated since 2022. So all of those links will be provided in the slides, in the notes. We just wanted to remind you also that you can take part in EEF funded projects, and there are a range of projects that are happening, small scale trials, large scale trials. If you are interested in taking part in any of those, you can scan this QR code and it will take you to a list of programs that might be something you're interested in terms of improving outcomes for your pupils in a specific domain. Again, the slides will be on the PowerPoint when you get the slides. So just to echo what Sonia said, a huge thank you for listening, and please do stay on the line if you do have any questions or comments. A recording will be made available on our newsletter, so hopefully you have signed up to that. So just what's left to say is thank you for attending.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Janine.